Morning to all. In today's session, we are going to learn about the market structure and pricing under perfect competition. So let's begin with the definition of market structure. In economic terms, market refers at how industries are classified, how they are differentiated based on a type of commodity or service and its nature of competition that exactly portray the market structure, where the market are being classified and differentiated on the basis of its nature, on the basis of their degree, on the basis of the varieties of goods and services that exactly reveals that the exact meaning of the market structure. It is based on the characteristics that also influence the behavior of an individuals or the companies. What would be the outcomes of the companies who are working in a specific market which belong to an homogeneous or differentiated products. Some of the factors are also being determine a market structures like a number of buyers and seller, ability to negotiate, a degree of concentration, the degree of differentiation of the products, and the ease and convenience of entering or exiting the market. And of course, it also refers to a difficulty level of entry and exit the market. Market structure is also refers to a different industries or the classification or a differentiation of products and services which are based on the degree and the nature of competition for the services and goods of a different companies. The four major popular markets structure and you can say including the perfect competition, oligopoly market, monopoly market, and the monopolistic market. So let's have an introduction and overview about these four types of market structure. So, before we come to describe the four main types or an overview of the four types of market structures, so it is very important to understand what are the factors which influence the market structure. Or, in other words, we can talk about what are the bases for the classification of the market structure. So the first one is nature of commodity. Second one is a freedom of movement of firms, number of buyers and sellers, knowledge of market condition, mobility of goods, and factors of production. So let's have an overview of one by one about all these factors. The first one is the number of buyers and sellers. The volume and the number of buyers and sellers in the market of a commodity also have a great or huge influence on the price of a commodity. If there are a large number of buyers and sellers in the market, then a single buyer or seller cannot influence a particular price of a commodity. If there's one seller of a commodities, like for example, a railways, then of course the seller have a full control over the price. So if there is a large strength of the buyers, the sellers, then of course there is a huge competition, and of course a single seller of in the market cannot influence the price of a commodity. But if the one seller is available in the market, for example, railways or any other, you can see the company, government company, the seller have a full control over the price. Next one is the nature of the commodity. The nature of the commodities also have a huge impact on the price of a commodity. So if a commodity is homogeneous in nature, like identical goods like pen, paper, books, then it's sold at a uniform price in the market. If the commodity is heterogeneous in nature, like non-identical, like different goods and services, different toothpaste brands, Maggie brands, etc., then definitely it could be sold at different prices. If you look up the bread brands like Britannia, or you can say other small brands, we can talk about, then of course they could be sold at different prices because the bread, butter, or the consumer goods can be sold at different prices. So if we talk about the toothpaste, if we talk about the toothbrush of different brands, then definitely it will be sold at different prices in the various shopping complexes. So the commodities with no close substitutes, such as railways, which charge a higher prices from the buyers, because of course for the railways expect only the one seller is available. So automatic that called the Indian Railways, that means a seller have a full control over the price, and in terms they can charge the high prices from its own buyers. So it totally depends upon the nature of the commodity, and accordingly the prices would could be charged from the buyers. So if the homogeneous or uniform, a same price would be charged. If it is heterogeneous, it charged at different prices. If it is a one you can see seller, that it will be an expensive charges or from the charged from the buyers. Next one is the freedom of movement of firms. Freedom, when we talk about the freedom in entry and exit of firms, it of course result and reveals a price stability in the market. So any restrictions on the entry or exit, entry of a new firms or exit of the old firms, then of course it also influence the prices of goods and services in the market, as of course, as there is no fear of competition from other existing or new firms. So there is always a freedom of entry and exit, when and which always reveals that there is a stability in the prices in the market, and means there is no fear of any of the competition from other existing and new firms as well. Next one is the knowledge of market conditions. If the buyers and sellers are full aware about the market condition and have a full knowledge about the market trends for the existing and the new products and services, then definitely a uniform price of goods and services prevails in the market. If the buyers and sellers are unaware about the market conditions, then definitely the sellers could charge different prices to different customers, etc., which refers to a situation called a price discrimination. So if the buyers and sellers are aware, a uniform price will be in the charge in the market. If the buyers and sellers are unaware, then definitely it leads to a situation called price discrimination. And the last one is the mobility of goods and factors of production. A free movement of factors of production from one place to another place is also reveals or prevails the uniform price in the market. If the movement of factors of production is not free, that it is chargeable, then definitely the prices of the goods and services may also differ from each other, and that's why it depends upon the factors of production whether free or not. If it is free, then there is a uniform price. If it is not free, then of course the prices could differ from each other, or it could be more expensive than the uniform price. So it totally depends upon the movements that on which area or which remote area or the urban area the factors of production moved on, whether it could be free or not. It totally depends on these factors, and accordingly the price will be charged in the market. So this is also the one of the main factor which influence, or it also termed as a basis of determining the, you can say, market structure. Now we can come up and the next section, that is the forms of market structure. As I already told, there are four main types of the market structure or forms of the market structure. That is the perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic, oligopoly. So when we talk about the forms are classified into two main categories, the perfect competition and imperfect competition. So when we talk about the imperfect competition, it also classified into three more categories. The first one is monopoly, second one is monopolistic, and the third one is oligopoly. So these are the three main categories which comes under the imperfect competition. So let's proceed with the description of these four types of market structure or get an overview about these market structure as well. So first one is perfect competition. It refers to a market situation where the large number of buyers and sellers who are selling an homogeneous product or dealing with the homogeneous product at a uniform price which is set by the market. That's exactly called the perfect competition. Homogeneous goods are those goods which have a similar shape, like size and quality. So, in the perfect competitive market, the seller sells homogeneous products at a fixed price, which are determined by the industry, not by the firm. So, if any of the price decided by the industry, that price the, the sellers has to follow and charge from the buyers. So in the real scenario, the situation of the perfect competition does not exist. However, you can say there are different buyers and sellers exist in the market. So we can talk about the agricultural goods which are sold by the farmers, which is same varieties like wheat, sugarcane, which is agricultural goods are homogeneous in nature. Their price is also influenced by the market forces. It totally depends upon the demand and supply of the goods and services. So agriculture are also called homogeneous goods in size and quality, which are sold by the farmers like wheat and sugarcane, and it totally depends upon the demand and supply of such goods. And that's why it comes under the perfect competition, which is a perfect example of such market situation. Next market structure or the market is monopoly form. So monopoly is completely opposite to the perfect competition market, or is an opposite form of market. Is divided into two Greek words. Mono means single and polis means seller. That means there is a single seller in the market who is selling a product which have no close substitutes. That's called monopoly. Let's take an example which is already explained in the earlier when I defined the market structure. So Indian Railways is one of the example of monopoly, that is there are various restrictions on the entry of new firms and exit of the existing firms, and of course the price discrimination is always being available. This situation has always been available in this market, because after all it is a one seller who charged the expensive prices or different prices to a different consumers, and that's why such market situation called monopoly. Next one is monopolistic competition. So monopolistic competition consists or a combination of the features of both perfect competition and the monopoly market. So it is a market situation where there is a large number of buyers and sellers who having a close substitute or who having a close related products rather than close substitutes. That refers to a differentiated products is called monopolistic competition. So the products or differentiated products are market who are selling up a differentiated products like toothpaste, shampoo, soaps, you can say any other you can say product you can say we can talk about the Maggi, we can talk about the breads, we can talk about the butters, we can talk about the cream milk, we can talk about any other product, differentiated products which are available in the market or relate to different brands. So let's take an example. The market for soap enjoys a full competition from different brands and has the freedom of entry of showing up the features of a perfect competition and monopoly. So every soap has its own different feature, its shapes, quality, which always allow the firms to charge a different prices to a different buyers for or for them. It also shows that the features of the monopoly market where you can say a price discrimination situation has always been exist and it will be charged to from the buyers. So that's why a monopolistic market situation consists of both features of perfect competition and monopoly market. Next one is oligopoly. So oligopoly is a market situation where there is a large sellers of a commodity is less and of course the number of buyers is more is called the oligopoly market. That means to say it is a situation where the sellers are less, buyers are more. Such markets are called oligopoly market. As the number of sellers in this market is less, so automatically the price and the output decisions of one seller impact the price of another seller. And output decision of other sellers in the market as well. So the interdependency among the sellers of a commodity which exists in the market is very high. Let's take an example. We can always talk about the luxurious goods, or we can talk about the producers of such luxurious goods like BMW, Audi, Ford, etc. It always comes under the oligopoly market where the number of sellers are less and the buyers are more. So this is how such situations arises when the buyers are less, but of course the supply of such product or the output, you can say it's very is in shortage. So that's become the situation of oligopoly market. So this is all about the feature. This is all about the shape of the demand curves under these four markets. So when we talk about the main five features of the perfect competition, the first one is number of sellers. There are many firms, many sellers in this particular market who are actually selling the homogeneous products and charging at uniform price in the same market. Next one is barriers to entry and exit. Barriers on entry, they are very low. There are very low barriers. Any new firm could easily enter into such market and the old firm could easily exist the market. So of course, there is no restrictions, so much restrictions to put on in such sellers who are exist under the perfectly competitive market. Product differentiation, they're identical product, that means the homogeneous products are deals in such a market where the sellers or a large number of sellers and buyers are available and they can buy such homogeneous products you can say at a uniform price. We can talk about any of the products who have an identical like in such category. Next one is nature of competition. It compete on price only. Whatever the competition exists in this market, it totally depends or relate to the price of a commodity. Because after all, there are many sellers who are selling the identical products. So the prices which is being decided by the industry, same price has to be charged from the buyers by the different sellers. So automatically the competition exists which is based on the price only, and whatever the competition you can say exists in between the seller, it relate to the price only. Next one is pricing power. There is no power given to the sellers, and after all, because hence the prices of the commodities has been decided by the industries rather than the firms, rather than the sellers who can decide the price and charge the same price to the seller. So industry is a price setter and or maker, and accordingly that price, that fixed or uniform price will be charged from the buyers by the different seller, and that is the rule or the you can see the assumption of one of the feature which exists under the perfect competition. Now we can come up to the you can see the demand curve. What is the shape of the demand curve of the firm under the perfectly competitive market? So as you can see, the shape of the demand curve, which becomes the horizontal and called a perfectly elastic demand curve, where the output it keeps on increasing, but the price would remains the constant, and hence the shape of the demand curve is perfectly elastic. That means it becomes a horizontal in shape. That means no firm is large to influence the price or affect the market price of a commodity. Here we can talk about the wheat production industry, where no difference, it doesn't matter, you can see how much the quantities or output is available. Even the price is to be set up according to the demand and supply. That means according to the market forces which has exist in the today's scenario. So this is how the demand curve of the firm is drive in a perfectly competitive market where no influence, no where the firms have no power to decide the price or to influence the market price. Because after all, the power is almost leads to an industry. So that's why it is in horizontal shape or perfectly elastic. Next one is the monopolistic competition. So these are the five main features in how the monopolistic market works. Number of sellers, as there are large number of sellers who are selling up the differentiated products, and how these firms charges you can see the different prices you can from the different buyers. Next one is barriers to entry and exit. It's a very low barriers as they have full freedom to entry and exist into a market. And when we talk about the barriers, there is no restrict barriers that have been imposed on the seller's entries or exist of the same. So very few where there's no problem to be faced or no hurdle to be faced by the sellers, that it is very that they say it is very difficult to entry and exit into such market. After all, the one of the feature is there is no such barriers. If it is barriers, the very low barriers where the sellers could easily manage and adjust to enter and exit the market. Next one is product differentiation. So as I told, it deals with the product differentiation. The differentiation is not based on the prices. No, the differentiation is based on the quality, is based on the features, is based on the marketing of such products in the market. We can always talk about the different products, the of different brands, the same products of the different brands. Like for example, toothpaste of different brands. They are different in quality, they are different in features, they are different in marketing tactics. So automatically, when we talk about the products of different brands or different sellers or many sellers or firms, that becomes a monopolistic market. Next one is nature of competition. Here we can talk about the nature of competition is price and product differentiation. So of course, the sellers automatically charges the different prices uh, of different products to a different consumers or buyers. Pricing power, monopolistic firms or where the firms who are exist in such market structure, the power of pricing or pricing power is very limited. And in that limited scope, the monopolistic automatically charge differentiated prices to a different consumers within such limited pricing power. Now we can come up to in this particular market what was the shape of the firm demand curve. So if you look up the diagram or take up any of the industry like shampoo industry we can take, and there are different three brands is already shown here in the particular visual presentation. So the demand curve, we can talk about the elastic demand curve where the rises accordingly to the demand of for their product, which stands for as the price increases, the demand will automatically declines, and hence we call elastic demand curve for such market where the limiting pricing power because of the differences in the quality, features, and marketing strategies of the many firms. So the prices accordingly to the demand of the products rather than supply. So rather than we can talk about the whole market forces. So whatever the price has to be set up is according to the demand, and whatever the price is charged according to the demand. And it's all about the perception. So about of the buyers. So the perceptions of the buyers is good towards the Head and Shoulders product shampoo. So definitely the consumers will come up and come forward to buy such product. So if the demand for the Head and Shoulders shampoo increases, so automatically the price would also get changed and charges differently from the different buyers as compared to the other brands of the shampoo. So this is how the functioning of the you can say of the different industries and their the demand curve, the shape of the demand curve will automatically changed, and in this particular the shape will remain the fixed called the elastic demand curve because the prices is always keeps on charging high to different consumers. So if the prices are high, then automatically the demand of that particular product will declines. And that's why it shows a downward sloping or elastic demand curve. The next market is oligopoly, where you can look up the diagram here. So the main five features of the such market situation has been also been shown. So let's talk about the features of such market structure. The number of sellers, there are few sellers. That means there are no large number of sellers. Even there are this number of sellers are available, but the strength of that seller is less. Barriers to entry and exit, of course, there are high barriers of entry and exit and depends upon the factors of production. That's called economies of scale. Next one is product differentiation, a very close substitute, and of course, a differentiated products as well. So if you look up any one industry and in other industries, there are different brands available. So differentiated products are available. Nature of competition, the price and product differentiation exists. That means each firm considers the actions of other firms. That means interdependency of sellers is always exist in such market. Pricing power is limited to significant. It could be limited, it could be significant, as it depends on the situation or the scenario of the market. Now we can talk about the firm demand curve of such market situation. So it totally depends upon the more differentiated firms, sellers, or a less differentiated firms. So when we let's take an example in telco industry and automobile industry. When we talk about the telco industry, they are Verizon, there are AT&T and Mobile T. So the basic services are very similar. There is no uniqueness, there is no more differentiation in these products in terms of telco industry. or telco products. So that's why it's become a less differentiated products. Now we talk about the more differentiated product. We talk about the automobile industry like Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, Audi. So these are the products which is very expensive, which is very luxurious products, and more and more differentiation has been seen in such products because they are different in color, quality, features, branding, marketing, advertising. It's all different and by the different companies. So that's why, because of the differentiation and because of the price and product differentiation, the firm demand curve, uh, the shape of the firm demand curve could easily drive. So if you look up the more differentiated product, the prices of such luxurious product are so expensive that the prices are so much high that the demand is automatically, you can say, start falling due to a more and more differentiated firm because the buyers cannot afford so much expensive cost for such luxurious product, and definitely the buyers are large in this particular market, but at the end it's not surety that the buyers could buy the could pay a lump sum amount for such products. And that's why at somehow the demand of such commodity for the more differentiated firms, it's downward sloping. Next one is less differentiated product. As the shape of the less differentiated product is not the same in case of the more differentiated product. We can say it is similar as the price is high, but it is lesser than the more differentiated firms, and as a result the demand, it's downward sloping, but it is less downwards than the more differentiated firms. So automatically the shape of the firm demand curve depends upon the differentiation level of the products. So this is how we can drive a demand form demand curve based on the product differentiation, in terms of industries, in terms of services, that how much the services are differentiated to offer to the buyers. Next, and the last market structure is monopoly. There are five features of the monopoly, that is number of sellers, barrier to entries and exit. So when we talk about the number of sellers, it is only a single sellers available. Barriers, there is a very high barriers to entry and exit because after all it is a single seller, so no new sellers or firms could enter into such market, and that's why there is a very high barriers to entry and exit. Product differentiation, there is no close substitutes of any of the products available or exist in such market. Nature of competition, there is a little competition exists. Pricing power is a significant pricing power of single seller has a full control uh, on the pricing of a product. Let's say Indian Railways, we can talk about. Next one is the firm demand curve of such market situation. So as the price is a regulated price by the seller, but at the end the market demand curve, because here we are talking about the market demand curve rather than the exact a single market. So the shape of the market demand curve or a single market, we both are equal to each other because there is no other firms and sellers which are exist in such market. So hence, so the demand curve of such markets, it's downward sloping because as the prices are more and more expensive, and after all the buyers have to buy, but it may not be sure the buyers are actually high or large in such market who can buy. So whenever the needs arises or whenever any choices or requirements, and accordingly the buyers has to buy the product from a single seller on the firm, and as a result the single market is equal to the market demand curve, or a single market demand curve is equal to the market demand curve due to the regulated price which has been set up by the single seller. And the power is almost significant, and they have full power to decide the price of a commodity, and accordingly they can sell the product in the market, in the monopoly market. So reasons for monopoly: when there is a high barriers to entry, copyrights and patents, government support is also available, and it's a control over the key resources. So these are the reasons for monopoly. So if you look up or any other reasons found in the market, so you can immediately talk about, oh, it is a monopoly market. Now we can come up to the determination of the market equilibrium under perfect competition. So when we talk about the equilibrium under perfect competition, it is a situation where the market demand equals to market supply, where the both market demand and supply are balanced to each other, and it is a situation where the balance or equality of the market forces, the situation of the equilibrium in the market could occurs. So during the equilibrium, the price and quantity becomes stable, and the equilibrium is have no change in it. So the stable price is also called an equilibrium price, where the both demand and supply are equal to each other, or intersect to each other. So the stable quantity is known as the equilibrium quantity, where the market supply and the market demands are equal to each other. So market equilibrium under perfect competition occurs when the market demand is equals to market supply. That means the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity is set up by the interaction of the market demand and market supply. But in this market, if the equilibrium market equilibrium could be achieved, but this equilibrium can also occur when the market demand is not equal, or the market demand is large than the market supply. So if such situation arises, it becomes disequilibrium. The concept of equilibrium is pure theoretical, but in reality, the markets will never remain the same in the perfect competition. So it could be an excess demand, it could be an excess supply as well. So in the long run period, any firm in the perfect competition always earns a supernormal profits. Abnormal losses, abnormal gains can also be wind up, and can also be regulated by the price mechanism tool, and it depends upon the market, you can say, forces, or in other words, the market supply and market demand. Let's take an example to understand. So as the price of, we can talk about the candies, because I like the most to eat candies. That's why I've taken the example of candies. So the price of candies, let's say 6, and the market demand for candy in units say 50, and the market supply for candy in units is also 50. That means neither there is excess or shortage or surplus. There is nothing. That means becomes zero. That means it is the situation of the market equilibrium, where the market demand and market supply is equal, and hence the market equilibrium level could be easily achieved. So we can look up the diagram after this to understand and how it could be drawn, and show this example and turn into visualized form. So let's begin with that. So this is a diagram. If you look up, the price has been set up for candy is 6, and at the 6, at rupees 6 of candy, the 50 quantities or 50 units of the candy has been sold off. So hence the supply curve and the demand curve. So this is, supply curve is always the downward sloping in the market, and the supply curve is upward sloping in the market. So once these two curves are intersect to each other, it becomes the market equilibrium, where the 50 units of the 50 units of the candy has been sold off at rupees 6. So x-axis represents the quantity demanded and supply of a commodity, and the y-axis the price has to be determined. SS is the supply curve and DD is the demand curve. So once they intersect each other, the market equilibrium situation would arrive to, and the corresponding price of the market equilibrium is rupees 6, and the units of quantity is rupees 50. And the point E, which is being defined by the interaction of these two curves, becomes the equilibrium quantity or an equilibrium point or a market equilibrium point. That's become a that's become a price determination where these two curves intersect to each other. So this is how you can represent the diagram with the help of the example very easily. Why any other price, not the equilibrium price? Under perfect competition, why only the 6 rupees is being used to determine the equilibrium price? Because if any price above rupees 6 is not an equilibrium, because there could be a surplus, and when there is a surplus, our situation arises is not perfect competition. It could be a monopolistic market or it could be an oligopoly market. So that's why it doesn't come under the rule where the market supply and market demand will be equal. So if it is excess, the rule will not be follow up and it becomes the excess stock. So price could also be low at the equilibrium price, that is rupees 6. If the price is lower than 6, that is also not an equilibrium price because the excess demand situation could arise. So if there is excess supply, excess demand, that's not a comes under the perfect competition, because perfect competition is already state on a rule where the market demand and market supplies is equal. So the buyers would really, if the price is lower than the rupees 6, it's not an equilibrium situation, as excess demand situation could arise. So the buyers would also ready to pay the higher price to meet their demand. So as a result, the price would also goes up or would go above the equilibrium price, that is rupees 6, which has been shown in the diagram or in the above table in the example section. So this is the reason that why other price is not the equilibrium price, because there is a when the price will goes up and down, there is a situation arises called a shortage in surplus. When such situation could arise, that's not a case of perfect competition. It becomes a case of a monopolistic or a monopoly market. Equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity in case of excess demand, that is shortage. When there is more demand for any of the product or more demand than the supply in the market, there is a situation called an excess demand or shortage. It only happens when the prices are lower than the equilibrium price. So if the equilibrium price is 6 and the prices go down to 5 and 4, it becomes the excess demand and shortage situation. So expected demand and constant supply definitely affects the prices and the quantity in the market. Sellers and their selling units would also be less than the buyers and their buying demands. So sellers are also willing to sell at lower prices, and the buyers are willing to buy more and more products. So this is called an unfulfilled demand, which leads to an increase in prices. So as price rise, there would be an expansion in the quantity supplied. In other words, we can call a movement along the supply curve. That means a movement in the same supply curve. There is a we can excess demand and excess supply, and the equilibrium prices will also be differs. So the analyst will also create a situation, a form a situation where the equilibrium price and quantity could be achieved. So this is an example where the price of candy could be 2, 4, and 6. Then market demand for candy in units is 150, 90, 50. Market supply for candy in units 60, 30, and 50. And the shortage and surplus, you can see the minus 90, minus 60, and 0. That means it is also called an excess demand, and the equilibrium where the demand and supply is equal. As we can see, the market demand is more than we can excess demand. As we can see, the second case of price, the price rupees 4 of candy, the market demand is also more than the market supply. We can call an excess demand by 60. You can see surplus, or by 60 shortage, or 90 shortage as well. So this is a diagram which has been shown excess demand. If you look up, we can look up the excess demand of movements of the demand and supply. So as in the excess demand, the price will become goes down. So automatically the quantities would remain the same. If the price would goes down, then demand curve, the movement along the demand curve shows the, you can see, right turn in case of supply and demand curve. So x-axis represents the quantity demanded, supply of a product, and the y-axis shows the price of you can see price of a commodity. SS is a supply curve, DD you can see demand curve. E is the equilibrium point, which is or market equilibrium point at rupees 6, and Q is a quantity demanded, which is called a 50 units. This is for the equilibrium quantity. So as you can see, if the prices would goes down, then automatically you can say a new demand curve would drive, which shows a movement along the demand curve, which is in rightward demand curve, and automatically a new equilibrium could arrive, that we can say the D1 and the S1. It leads to a shortage of demand. So due to the shortage of demand will remains unfulfilled, and it means the increasing its prices would be P1 to P, and higher prices would always you can to you can see a shortage of demand, and the demand or the demand for our products gets lower and the higher supply. So the equilibrium price E would be restored at the price rupees 6. So once the price would goes down, the people would try willing to buy you can say more and more products. But in this particular excess demand, the prices would become higher, and as a result, demand would not be fulfilled and the supply would become increased. So automatically we have to restore our equilibrium point at point E, that is at rupees 6. Equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity in case of excess supply, that is a surplus situation. Excess supply is also a market condition where the quantity supplied is greater than the demand for a commodity. So automatically it is a situation which occurs at prices which is greater than the equilibrium price. So one of the common example of such condition is price flow. The higher prices which leads to an expansion in quantity supplied, and suppliers will want to sell more and more when prices are high. So in the market, the quantity supplied will be more than the quantity demand. And such situation is called excess supply or surplus. Supply will remain idle in the market when there is no buying capacity of a consumers. So in order to sell up the idle supplies, the suppliers will also decrease the selling price, then the excess stock or idle stock, not excess, idle stock would able to sell all their products. So in this case, every seller have an option to decrease their prices so that the consumer can willing to buy the supplies at a lower prices. And as price will fall, two main situation arise. There will be a contraction in the quantity supplied, a movement along the supply curve, and there will be expansion in the quantity demanded, a movement along the demand curve. So due to this movement, prices is fall, then automatically it is the situation, it is a point where to restore them to a level of equilibrium. So at the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity will set up accordingly so that we can reach up the situation of the market equilibrium in the market. So this is an example which can be shown the price of a candy that is 6, 8, 10. Market demand for candy units 50, 30 and 10. Market supply for candy units is 50, 70 and 120. So and automatically the equilibrium level is where the demand and supply is equal. So automatically excess supply demand is less than the supply, that is excess supply. So automatically plus 40 plus 110, it shows the excess supply as the demand is low. That means the excess stock or idle stock is available uh, to sell off to the consumers at a lower prices. So this is a diagram where we can look as the prices are become, you can say gets down to sell your products at a lower prices, then automatically the movements of the demand and supply goes downwards. So as the on the x-axis quantity and supply would be measured, and the y-axis prices are measured of commodities, and E is the equilibrium point where which is an equilibrium point at point 0.6, and Q is the equilibrium quantity at 50 rupee at 50 units. As you can see, the P1 are the price are the high prices, which is D1 is as a new demand which is less than the market demand, and of course when we talk about the supply curve, which is more than the supply equilibrium supply, and this particular situation leads to a surplus situation, and in such situation the supply or a quantity supply would become idle, and as a result, due to a decline in prices, the sellers could sell off their quantities or idle quantities or units to the buyers. And in this, due to such aspect or due to such you can say condition, our price level would get declined, and a formal market situation could arrive, that is from by lowering the price from P1 to P, where the market equilibrium price could easily be achieved. So the lower prices will cause a higher demand. That means the movement along the demand curve, and lower supply, that is movement along the supply curve. An equilibrium point will be reached or restored at point at rupees 6, which is called a market equilibrium price, or at a market equilibrium point, that is E. So this is how you can explain the excess supply case, supply surplus in the market, and excess demand, which is a shortage of the market. So this is the difference between the four market structure: perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. When we talk about the number of firms, many, one, many, few, freedom of entry, perfect competition, free, regulated, free, restricted, nature of product, homogeneous, exclusive, either homogeneous or differentiated, oligopoly, differentiated, differentiated, or undifferentiated. Implication of demand curve at horizontal, a downward sloping, relatively, you can say elastic, downward sloping, fairly elastic, downward sloping, relatively inelastic. Average size of firms: small, medium, large, and large in the you can say in the second last and the last markets type of market structure. Possible consumer demand is low, low to medium, medium to high, and high. Profit making possibility, that is none, medium, medium, and high. Government intervention is also none. Is a slight chance, greater chance in oligopoly. Monopoly would be a high chance because there is a single firm. Example, we can talk about the McDonald's. Monopolistic, we can talk about the Cost Plaza Hotel. Oligopoly, we can talk about the Lube X, and the monopoly, we can talk about the Air Canada, yeah, Air India, yeah, Air Indian Railways, etc. So let's take a numerical example when the under the situation of a perfect competition where where the market demand and market supply would equal. So there is an equation has been given: the aggregate demand, the Q is equal to 25 minus 0.5 P, and aggregate supply which is equal to 10 plus 1.0 P. So we need to calculate the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So as another perfect competition tool where the market demand or aggregate demand is equal to the aggregate supply and market demand. So both the equation, if the learner could keep these two equations equal, then we can easily solve this equation and we can get the price, equilibrium price, which is 10. So once we get the price level 10, we can put this rupees 10 into any of the equation, either aggregate demand or aggregate supply. We can easily get the quantity which is equal to 20. So the quantity supplied becomes 20, and the price level or quantity demand or supply will become 20, using up solving up these two equation, and the price would be determined rupees 10. So once we equalize this equation, we can easily get the price level, that is 10. So once we get the price level, equilibrium price, that is 10, we put the in the equation, and we can easily get the quantity or equilibrium quantity which is equal to 20. Profit maximization in perfect competition market. So there are two main conditions where the profit could be maximized. So the profit maximization condition in this market could be achieved by determining the output level where the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and the marginal cost curve intersect the demand curve, which is called a marginal review curve. So these two condition, if these two condition has been fulfilled in a particular diagram or in a particular market, then of course the profit maximization case could occur. So these are the two main conditions where the MC, marginal cost, is equal to marginal revenue, and the marginal cost curve intersect the demand curve, that is the marginal revenue curve. So in the perfect competition market, price is determined by the free market forces. So the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. That means the demand, marginal revenue, average revenue in such market will remain the same. As a firm can maximize the profit by operating at that level of output where the marginal cost curve to intersect the marginal revenue curve, or the marginal cost, you can say, tends to rise and exceeds the marginal revenue curve. If these two conditions would fulfill, the profit maximization situation could achieved. So this is all about in this today lecture. Thank you for listening this lecture, and I will come up to more and more interesting and upcoming topics or important topics in the upcoming session. So till time, thank you for listening and namaste to all.